Hello there, and welcome to the EDC Empire. Today we're going to be taking a look at the Elite Tactical Guardsman Eluder. The Elite Tactical Guardsman Eluder is made by Elite Tactical, who loves to broadcast how elite and how tactical they are, and is a bit of a series of theirs with two separate models. There's this model with aluminum handle scales and a Tanto blade, and then there is a drop point G10 handled blade, which the G10 looks to be contoured and is also $6 or $7 cheaper. So depending on your aesthetic choices, you can take a look at those. The G10 version also does not have a glass breaker, which we'll get into later on in the video. The Elite Tactical Guardsman Eluder, which I'm now just going to refer to as the Guardsman, is made in China and is locking via a crossbar lock. To deploy the eluder, you just use a Thumbstud, as is standard, and that is on both sides. The blade is made out of D2, which from what I can tell, it is not the most well heat-treated D2 in the world. It seems to be just fine. It is heat-treated, which is always good, but it isn't the most fantastic treat that I've ever seen. It is actually decently thin, but about average behind the edge. This is, of course, a Tanto blade with a partial flat grind with a nice black coating or black real paint on the blade, which I must say, even out of the box, it was not the most consistent job of paint, and that was a little bit disappointing, along with black aluminum handles here, where, as I mentioned earlier, you can get a black G10 as well. The overall length of the Guardsman Eluder is 8.91 inches when open and 5.06 inches when closed, which is including the glass breaker. I'm assuming that the dimensions of the aluminum and the G10 version of the Guardsman appear to be the same, minus the glass breaker, so keep that in mind as you go as well. The overall depth when folded of the Guardsman is 1.19 inches and has a width at the pivot of 0.54 inches, which means that compared to your PM2, you're just a little bit thicker. And then getting into some size comparisons, we have the PM2 and we have the Delica 4. As you can see here, it is larger than both the PM2 and the Delica. A little bit more, or obviously more comparable to the PM2, but larger than both, which you would expect from that blade size. And then bringing in the Civivi Elementum and the Benchmade Bug Out, it is, of course, larger than both by quite a bit of a margin. The blade length of the Guardsman is 3.85 inches with an actual edge length of 3.55 inches. And that extreme difference is due to the guard, hence Guardsman, which we'll get into later on in the video. The blade stock is 0.12 inches, which is about on average, and has a weight of 5.64 ounces. It probably is a little bit lighter with the G10, but I can't imagine it being a whole lot lighter. These liners are not milled out in any way. It's pretty much just a brick. So now let's get into my thoughts on the Elite Tactical Guardsman Eluder. Unfortunately, my primary complaint about the Guardsman is kind of a big one, and that is that the main edge of the, at least Tanto version, does have some blade wrap, and that did not come out of box. That was purely because it does hit against the backspacer, which is a bit of an issue. I'm sure as I sharpen it, it will stop hitting against that, and you can actually see there's a bit of a line in the backspacer. But it is kind of unfortunate. It's not in the part of the blade of a Tanto that I use the most. I'll either use the very top edge or the very bottom edge of it the most, but it is unfortunate, and I'm a little bit disappointed in that respect. In the play department, there is very little or none side to side, but there is a pretty noticeable amount up and down, which is a little bit unfortunate, but I haven't really noticed that affecting performance a whole lot. Actually, the lock has been quite sturdy, as it is an Axis lock. There is this glass breaker, as I mentioned earlier. It's kind of annoying just to carry it because of that. Getting out of the pocket, you have to be a little bit more careful than you would with like your bug out, for example, but it's fine. You'll get used to it. You can probably remove it if you really want to. I've kept it because I think it just completes the whole aesthetic, having a rifle scope on their logo, having Elite on the back spacer, having Guardsman Eluder just stamped in here in super serious text, this little scope on the pocket clip, the milling. It just completes the aesthetic, really. I picked this version because I just thought it looked even more overly serious and tactical than the drop point does. The drop point actually just looks kind of like a normal knife. So yeah, depending on what you're expecting from this knife, decide on the version. The action, though, is pretty good. Besides it hitting against the backspacer, centering is quite good, and it genuinely just, it works. It's a functioning Axis lock. Usually I can middle finger flick it pretty well. It's a little bit long, so if you're not used to carrying larger knives, or if you have smaller hands, it actually might be a little bit annoying to handle. I know from people that I've given it to, they've complained that it was a little bit unwieldy if they weren't used to using it, but to be honest, it hasn't been much of an issue for me. And yeah, it's nice. It's running on bearings, so that's probably why the action is so fine and good. But yeah, there is another mounting point on the pocket clip on this other side, so fully ambidextrous. So that's always good. Now getting to kind of the fun part of this knife, the guard. It does like to kind of just sit out like that and not flat. Depending on how you flick it, it usually will sit something like that, and then you can kind of push it down. It works. It doesn't really serve a functional part. In their advertisement video, which you've got to watch if you're at all interested in this knife, you've got to watch their 2 ads for this knife. They advertise this as having a enhanced tactical advantage. You really don't get anything from it. Maybe it's nice if you're kind of a pushback to choke position. It's kind of nice, and it doesn't really make a difference when you're all the way out here, but when you want to just kind of place your finger here, it's a little bit in the way. But to be honest, I didn't really notice it. Most of my push cuts and stuff, they weren't really affected. It's just fine. It's cool. It's kind of fun to flick around and then see this kind of mini daggery sword thing come out of your pocket. It's just fun. I wouldn't take this model super serious. That's why I got it, was just because it's cool. So yeah, keep that in mind. Surprisingly, the one thing about these kind of cheaper OEM knives is that I'm usually a little bit disappointed with the edge, which has actually been pretty good. Out of box, this thing was actually quite sharp, and it stayed relatively sharp. Other than this rolling, I haven't had any huge issues with it. It's behaved worse than some D2 I've seen, but pretty similar to other D2 that I've seen. I dislike D2 at a certain point, but I actually don't hate its performance. I think if it's done right, it can be a really nice steel if you have a coating. I don't love it on its own because I rust it very easily, but yeah, it's fine. It works well here. This paint isn't really going to do anything about it. You've got to keep an eye on it. Yes, this is just paint, but yeah, it's just kind of fine. For the $24 or $30, this is the $30 version, it's not bad at all. I'm not expecting a great heat treat. To be honest, this is a lot of knife for the price, and you can get, if you really want something which performs, you can get a Penguin by QSP. You can get a Rat 1 or Rat 2. There's a lot of options which you can get instead of this. This is just fun. Overall, if you've never experienced an Axis lock, I guess this is a good option. It has decent action, pretty similar to my bug out, if I'm being honest. Maybe a little bit smoother because of the bearings, but yeah, it works. It works. It's nice. If you want a big tactical-ish knife, maybe gas station-esque, I wouldn't be surprised if someone's thinking that right away. Maybe, sure, you can go with that. But yeah, it's just fun. If you're intrigued by this little guard, yeah, it's a good option. This was original, or this is kind of styled off of a lot of different like style or traditional styled knives. I know there's the Case Cheetah, which has this exact same thing. So if you want something that's maybe a little bit different in style, look at something like that. But yeah, this is just fun. It's really cool. So yeah. If you own an Elite Tactical knife in general, please comment down below what you think about it. And if you enjoyed this video, please consider commenting, liking, and subscribing. Thanks for watching.